The focus of this next session is on housing, which really is a key component if you wish people to age in place. And so we're going to hear from 3 different individuals who are going to talk about different aspects of housing. And the first one is Alison Sigardo from Senior Services Society of BC, who will tell us about their service, which is one that has been historically very valued by those of us that live in British Columbia in terms of telling seniors where they can find some housing and what types are available. Secondly, we're going to hear about Brightside Homes, which is a project that I know about because the previous CEO, I think, was one of our students. Oh. I think. Oh. I know I did some research at Brightside, and it's a really interesting community resource. And then the third one is Louis Francosi from the Dania Home Society, which is really what in the old days we used to call a multi-level project that has different kinds of housing on the same place. And so with no further ado, let us have our first presentation.
Thank you, Gloria, and the SFU Gerontology Research Team for the opportunity to be here. I would like to acknowledge the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people on whose lands we get to connect and learn today. As Gloria said, as an agency whose mission has been supporting older adults who are homeless or at risk of homelessness in BC for just over 4 decades, it is wonderful to be here and to have a voice. When preparing for this conversation, I was grateful to get the guidelines and have tried to weave them into a way that makes sense to the academics here and to provide some context that data alone, I feel, does not do justice to. To me, housing and homelessness are the 2 sides of a coin, and the clients we serve for the last 44 years have been very much like this coin. Unfortunately, I realize it is not a Canadian coin. I should have done better work. But to our neighbors south of the border, yes. But our clients that we serve are constantly on edge, literally not knowing from day to day which side they're going to land and what the impact of that's going to be. And for this conversation, I wanted to frame it by using the Indigenous definition of homelessness, and I'm going to read that, which is defined as lacking a structure of habitation, not just a structure of habitation. It is more fully described and understood through a composite lens of Indigenous views, including connection to individuals, families, communities, and I think that really relates to all the conversations this morning about connection and community. So a little bit about who Senior Services is. It is a small community-based nonprofit charity located in New Westminster, whose focus has been working with this demographic of individuals that might be 10% of the total population of seniors, when you think of seniors from anywhere from 55 to 100 plus, but a very much a growing population, unfortunately. And with the numbers in BC alone, that number has grown 5 times in the last 10 years, and there's not enough of a focus on this group. We are governed by an amazing volunteer board and have a dynamite group of volunteers that work with us in delivery of our service. And the team that I work with is truly the strength of our operation. It's a small team of ordinary people that do extraordinary work. We have 3 streams of work: housing and system navigation. I know we've used the word navigation a lot, and I'll tell you more as we go through what we navigate here. On average, our navigation includes serving 1,400 clients a month with our work in one of our programs called Shine. Knowledge mobilization, and that means not just sharing the knowledge, but actually working with our partners who want to be part of doing this work in their local community to be able to do it, everything from helping them with doing a job description for the person they're going to recruit, training them one-on-one, and sharing the information. So it's not just sharing the data, but actually working with them to be at capacity. And direct services, which we do in New Westminster, which is the Better at Home program that the panel this morning talked about, Beverly and the United Way. Our social programs, temporary housing, which has been recognized as a promising practice locally and nationally, and a rapid access unit along with outreach. All of that said, we deliver those programs with a budget of $1.5 million annually. So given all the people that you heard talk this morning, from universities to larger organizations, I wanted to put that in context. So a little bit about the numbers for seniors in BC. Probably no surprise to many of you. In 2022, the population was just over 1 million. They now represent about 20% of the population and has increased. The critical pieces that we recently talked about in the previous presentation was the fact that about 42% of the seniors in the Lower Mainland do not have English as a first language, and the piece around the homeless population. And we know that number is underrepresented because a number of the seniors are really, really stigmatized, or they fear the stigma of being unhoused. So I know we serve a lot of them who live in their car on the street, because there are no shelters for seniors. There are shelters for most demographics, but not for seniors. And 99% of the population we serve at Senior Services are unhoused for the first time between 70 and 90. So if you can imagine that, they lived in their home all of their life, and they're not able to navigate the system. Another number is that with all the cities in the country, BC has the unique distinction of having 7 cities in BC that have the highest population of seniors. Qualicum, Sydney, Parksville, Southern Gulf Islands, Nanaimo, and Osoyoos. So that's just some of the vulnerability indicators that we've traditionally used. Living alone, renters living alone in affordable housing, women over 85, recent immigrants, 4 years or less, people who don't speak a local language, and no post-secondary education. So that's true, and I have more to say. So I tried to condense all of the pathways to homelessness, or as I say, barriers to aging in place, and put them on a single slide, but there was too much information. So bear with me, I'll try and go through it quickly, but there are so many pathways that we see. And I tried to give it a little bit of a trend. So in the past, it was typically rent for finance, but rent is one pathway. More recently, what we've seen, and it's about 12% of the people we see, are people who owned stratas that they had paid off, and now with assessments for the stratas, find that they can't get a loan to pay that assessment, so they are forced into a fire sale. And then the funds that they get from that fire sale is not enough to carry them, so they are forced into homelessness. The rent ceilings, of course, we know are a challenge. And SAFER, I know we had an increase, but with those living in market housing, the SAFER increase just doesn't do it. So we need almost $1,000 as a maximum for SAFER to make a difference. Yes, we have increased the number of people we will be distributing SAFER to with the increase in the eligibility from 30,000 to 37. So there'll be some who get it, but the ones who are in highest need, under 24,000, will not be part of that group because they can't layer in services and funding one over the other, so they'll only be entitled to SAFER. Employment structure that affects people. Most of the older adults we work with have had to go back to work to make ends meet. And of course, with any employment restructure in major organizations that may be part of, the older adults are the first out the door. Sector staff funding, and that probably burns me the most as somebody in the nonprofit sector, but coming to this from banking and real estate in my previous years. Most of the clients we see, good 30%, are from the sector. So that says something about people who've worked in the community sector for most of their lives. EDs of societies, staff of societies are finding themselves recipients of this service. That says a lot. On a curious day, I took a look at the partners we had across the province that deliver the service for seniors, and actually did a check-in with all the garbage collection agencies in those cities. No surprise. People working in garbage collection get more money than the community sector that works for seniors. So I won't say more on that. Housing. In the past, we had single-family housing. We had a lot of community support. People lived within what was their comfort level, had time, and didn't have the pressures of today to be able to volunteer more and do more. A lot of areas were walkable where seniors lived, and more affordable. Today, what we're finding is a lot of the older product, which is walk-up buildings, makes seniors' lives difficult if they can't walk down. It was a lot more true for us than in 2020 when we had the heat dome. Our office is in New Westminster, and we had the unique distinction, unfortunately, of having 27 seniors die from dehydration because they couldn't get down into a cooling center. That is just not okay, but that is what we're living with. Mobile parks. With the increase in cost of land in BC, in Canada, mobile parks were not at their highest and best value. Consequently, we had anywhere from 100 to 500 people calling us saying their mobile park was sold, they no longer had housing, and they needed to be connected because mobile parks, particularly in the Okanagan, were strategically located between hospital facilities, and they needed access to that care. Well, the replacement unit was anywhere near that facility, so getting to their medical appointments was a challenge alone, not to mention, of course, the demographic, the size of the unit, the accessibility of the unit, all of those features. And I'm going to say something that might offend people, but this is an observation from our point of view. Co-ops. Co-ops are a model of housing that was started many years ago with really good intention to be cooperative. Many are, most are, but the seniors that we see are not in those co-ops, where if they no longer can contribute to the operation of deferring the cost of their housing, they find themselves having to pay between $500 to $1,000 a month. Fortunately, with our work and advocacy with BC Housing, anybody that's funded under BC Housing is able to get some kind of support. What about all the other co-ops that don't have that? So that is a problem in the design. We've been asking for a model that has at least 2 units of independent housing or single unit housing on every co-op so that a senior can age in place without having to contribute. They've earned that. The Tenancy Act, RTB, there are all kinds of rules around tenancy, and I know we've got 2 landlords here who will talk more about it, but what we see is seniors who are forced to leave their home after many years under all kinds of pretenses. Yes, the acts have been tightened up a bit, and we're seeing some changes, but not enough for seniors. Accessibility, this is something that's problematic, not just in single-family homes, but in a lot of the built product, where it's built with an adaptable design that a senior could adapt when they need it. But they can't do that for entrances to laundry rooms. They can't do that for hallways. So building a universal design standards is really something that's basic, so that if somebody does need to use a walker or does need to use a mobility device, they can go and do their own laundry. They're not dependent on home health to do it because they can't walk through the door. So that's what we're seeing. And we all know there's a long wait list for programs like Better at Home that does well, but there's not enough of it. I talked about weather, so I won't belabor that, but that is a problem and it's not getting better. But I'm very fortunate in New Westminster. Shout out to the city and a number of cities that are doing that, where they've put in place cooling centers. A number of the landlords have put in blackout blinds, have created a cooling room in multi-unit buildings, put in water coolers, and things to help a senior who can't leave, who may be going through chemotherapy, who may be going through all kinds of treatment, that cannot leave to go to a cooling center to actually stay home and be okay. Health and mental health. A lot of the services for seniors were in person, and again, a lot of community support, family support was around them. Present access, and I think thanks to COVID, access to any service that a senior needs is online. Nothing worse than going to a bank during COVID and have a senior standing outside the door and saying, I just need my money, but they need a phone that is a smartphone to get a QR code, to get a number, to get their money. Well, they don't have that, and then what happens? Or somebody calling us and saying, I have my AGM tonight, they're going to pass a $3 million budget, and I can't get to the meeting because it's online and I don't have a QR code and I don't have email. Can you help me? That's problematic, right? So developing systems that work for people without taking that lens. Medications and the cost of it, besides access to a doctor, medications are problematic because unlike many provinces in the country, BC has a distinction of a number of medications that are covered under other provinces, not covered for seniors here. So they have a prescription, but they can't fill it. I don't need to say more to this group. And we know going to a walk-in clinic or going to telehealth online doesn't quite do it. There's a lot of coordination of care, and that seems to be missing in this. What do we see for the future? More chronic conditions, as seniors do live longer, increase in signs of mental health and depression, because it's just overwhelming. I mean, it's overwhelming for the average person. Never mind somebody who's losing control and are recognizing they're losing control of things they could do comfortably. Okay. I know I've got too many slides, so I'm going to be a bit quick here. Language. I know we had a lot of presentations this morning about having language translations and having access to services in the individual senior's language. As a person who's a visible minority and a person who came to this country as an adult, what we're seeing would defy that in many ways, because while it's nice to have the language you come from, having a local language is critical. The abuse we see of seniors with their family members, with neighbors, with their lack of access to supports, or the stigma that they have going to a community group that knows their language and could know their family is really problematic. So they want to be able to speak a local language and access services. So how do we make that a policy that a senior who comes here maybe as a sponsored caregiver of grandchildren is required by the family to go and speak English, encouraged to go and learn a local language in BC at least? I think that would be helpful. It would eliminate a lot of the problems we are seeing. Yeah, I talked about that. Okay. Technology. I know we had a bit of a debate earlier, and thanks to Gloria. I can't wait to see the AI piece coming forward. But limited access to technology in the past, simple devices, hearing aids, home devices were all we had in maybe the 20s, 30s. Now we have more assistive devices, wearable devices, more connectivity, and it is something that's here to stay. But as you age too, having having technology that is something that you can access. I don't know about you, but I know I find it difficult sometimes. I get up in the middle of the night and go to touch my phone. It doesn't have the tactile features that you would have that would help you. And I can't imagine a senior who has lost those pieces. How do they bridge those gaps? So yes, it's good. Technology is helpful. And there are also challenges, and just being mindful of that. The other piece we've seen a lot of is, and again, to quantify it, probably about 20% of the clients we serve, which is about 12 to 14,000 a year, digital scams. So while they have access to technology, they're comfortable with it. In this time of critical isolation, financial scams, personal scams, including marriages to people from overseas, and all kinds of scams. So that's the downside of technology that we're seeing with seniors and resulting in them becoming homeless. Ageism, underpinning all of it is ageism, there's no question. With a significant number of people becoming seniors, that is something that hopefully we will see less of, but it's just being mindful of it every day in all the conversations we have. And ageism, I guess, works both ways, even for younger people. So respecting what they bring to it, as well as seniors. In housing options, we had limited options. People were mostly intergenerational housing. Now we see more of an increased demand for diverse types of housing and supports, and a need for investment in senior-friendly infrastructure as we move forward. So as I try to wrap up and summarize what we do, so this is a service map. I know it's very, very busy, but if somebody comes to Senior Services Society or one of our partners across the province, this is the range of services you get. Everything from information and referral if you're an independent senior or a family of a senior that needs support in navigating the system. You'll have access to a person who will give you information, whether it's electronically or on the phone, or print out copies and send it to you if you need that. If it's something that you need more of, then there's a navigator that would help you with actually understanding your needs, and that can be a long process because of all of the shame that a senior is working with the first time they're accessing a support. And we've got a really great group of navigators, both locally and in the province, that work with us, that are able to peel the onion layers and get to the root of the need and the solution. As I said, we don't have shelters. So in the absence of shelters, Senior Services has been able to access supports through BC Housing with 15 units of temporary housing that act as senior-specific shelters. We've been running that program there for about 8 years now, and very pleased to say that every senior that has been through that program with us, it's a program that has independent housing for that senior for about 3 to 6 months with a case manager attached who helps them both manage their expectations, help coach them for working with the landlord, and advocates for the landlord honestly and with integrity. So we put on the hat of a landlord. We don't try and put a square peg in a round hole. So if anything, our relationships with all our partners has been truly based on integrity. And happy to say at the end of 8 years, every senior we've placed who was homeless has stayed permanently housed. And how I can say that, you probably say, well, how do you know that they are? Every partner we started to work with, and I'm pleased to say that Brightside is one of them, has continued to take seniors that we have referred to them, because we try to make sure that it is a match both for the partner agency as well as for the senior, and try to manage that expectation. We also found that there were a lot of seniors who were falling through the gaps, because even to get into temporary housing, they needed a BC Housing number, and that's not always possible. So we were able to get through a private sector grant for independent units across the province called Rapid Access Units. So we have one in US, or one in the Lower Mainland right now, funded through Coast Capital. And that unit gives a senior anywhere up to a month of housing and 3 meals a day, and a case manager to work with them. And that's somebody who goes into hospital for a particular condition, has a chronic development, stays there for 3 months, and contacts his landlord on the day of discharge saying, well, now I'm ready to go back home. And the landlord says, oops, you've been away 3 months. We thought you were dead. So guess what? Your unit has been relet and all your possessions have been discarded. So somebody like that at 4 o'clock in the evening can call us and we can put them into that unit. And our hope is to have at least 1 or 2 units of that at every city level so that a senior in crisis has a place to land before they can find housing. Now, all that I talked to you about in the previous slide is what we're trying to do with our partners. So Senior Services has delivered this work for, as I said, many years and have done well with it. So rather than try and be everywhere, we thought, let's identify partners who want to do this in their local community, because for seniors, being supported in their city is probably the most important thing. Okay. Okay. All right, sorry about that. But in trying to do that at the city level, we've been very fortunate to have partners like Western Seniors Network, Langley Seniors Resource, Richmond Cares, Richmond Gives. We've got partners in every region of the province, 2 partners, and they've been able to work with us collaboratively. They have support of our navigator in our office who helps them with walking through whatever system challenges they run into. 5 years ago, for example, we had 22% of the clients that we served caught between provincial and federal funding. So on their 65th birthday, they stopped getting funding, and they weren't connected to the pension at the federal level. And they were made homeless by the system. 6 or 8 months later, they'd get a lump sum from $18,000 to $20,000. But in the meantime, they were made homeless. So with advocacy and support, we've now been able to bridge that gap, and happy to report that last year we had 2 people in that gap. We're trying to do the same with CRA, so if anybody has a connection to CRA that they can connect me to, I am absolutely interested, because that's one we're trying to wrestle with this year. If a senior doesn't pay file their taxes by the 30th of April, they are automatically cut off GIS. And they have to refile, which again takes 6 to 8 months. And for seniors living with $20,000 to $24,000 a year, that is problematic. And I'm done. Thank you. I apologize. So this is our hope for the system with nodes across the province. And this is our vision for seniors, to be independent. And we'll feel free to connect. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. And yeah, I mean, I can attest the great work that Senior Services Society does. So thank you for including me in this. My name is William Azaroff. I'm the CEO of Brightside Community Homes Foundation. I'll tell you a little bit about what we do and how our model works. So we're a charitable nonprofit housing society. We started in 1952 as a senior serving organization. In the 90s, we expanded our scope to include low-income families and people with disabilities. So those are the 3 kind of groups, the demographics that we serve. We currently have 23 buildings. It says throughout Metro Vancouver. They're all, and I'll show you a map in a second, they're all in Vancouver. We actually just purchased a building in Burnaby, which is our first building outside of the city of Vancouver. And in addition to those 23 buildings, we have 4 older sites that were end of life that we are redeveloping to double or triple the number of homes in each of those locations. So that'll be 485 new units coming online. People just started moving into this week, and they open over the next couple of years, those 4 redevelopments. And if we look at the housing continuum, where we sit on the housing continuum is in the affordable rental housing. So we're independent living. We don't provide supports for our residents. But you can see the Brightside lines kind of move over a bit, because what we see is that lots of residents need support, sometimes for limited periods of time. We can't provide that support, but how do we enable them to get access to the support so they can stay housed, they can get through maybe a crisis or a health situation they're in, and then they may be able to return to full independent living or with minor supports that they can get independently in that home. And then on the other side, market rental housing, as we do these redevelopments, every funding model today requires some percentage of low-end of market units to cross-subsidize. So for the first time, we're going to have low-end of market units required by our funding models. So that's new for us, and we're today, literally, our first low-end of market resident moved into this redevelopment. So this is brand new to us. So a lot of, to what Allison said, a lot of our residents are at risk of homelessness. And the core demographic we serve are people who earn $20,000 to $32,000 a year. So they're paying 30% of their income in rent. And that's sort of the core, our sort of legacy portfolio. That will shift with these low end of market units, but that's still a small percentage of our overall portfolio. So that's who we serve. A bit of data, this may not be visible from the back of the room, but you can see that up at top left, 76% of our residents today are seniors. And if you include 55 plus, it's virtually all of our residents. So we definitely skew older. We do have some family units, and we'll introduce more family units. So this will change slowly over the coming years, but that's primarily who we serve. We skew more female than male. We skew heavily towards living alone, as you can imagine. These are mostly studios and one-bedroom units that we rent. A lot of people have been with us for a long time. Obviously, once you get into housing like this, hopefully you found your kind of forever home, but also market conditions around you mean you can't move, right? Like you can't go back into the market, and unless you find another affordable housing provider, you are where you are. So you pay 30% of your income in rent, and so you can afford to stay there as long as you want to. So we do skew towards long tenureship. Ethnicity, I mean, primarily white with a strong number of Chinese, indigenous, Filipino, and Southeast Asian backgrounds, and then others, but those are sort of most of our demographics. So we do this annual resident engagement survey with SFU every year or every other year. And then languages at home, primarily English with Cantonese, Spanish, Mandarin, French, Russian, so a number of languages, but primarily English speakers. This is a map of our properties. So we started out with a property in East Vancouver that organization was able to buy through the sale of carnations back in 1952. So a time when you could buy land by selling flowers. Those days are somewhat behind us now. And then through a variety of ways, we acquired land. Either through some of those are on long-term land leases with the City of Vancouver or with churches, but primarily it's land we have acquired over many years at a time when buying land in Vancouver was not really newsworthy. And then we have this one building here now in Burnaby. So we are on the stolen lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and now more recently on the Kwantlen and Kakite peoples. So that's whose land we're on. And then just to give you a sense, I don't usually get into this much detail, but this is a university, so I wanted to give you some data. So it gives you a sense of the kinds of rent ranges that our residents pay. So from over there on the left, deep subsidies. So there's a little BC Housing logo next to that. So in buildings that are BC Housing subsidized, we have some percentage of units that we can put out at shelter rate. So person with disability rate, shelter rate if you're on welfare. So these are flat rates of, it says $445, but that should be $500 a month, I think. So these are people who basically earn minimum amounts from either PWB or government assistance, $17,000 a year. That's why the minimum maximum is the same. These are people on those rates. So we have some number of units in any building with a BC Housing agreement. So 7 of our 20 some odd buildings have BC Housing agreements. Then the next category is where most of our rents as a long-standing organization where we do good maintenance on our building, we keep them in good repair, we keep things simple, mortgages, a lot of them are paid off. We call this internally subsidized. So minimum rent for a new resident is $800, which works perfectly with SAFER. So if it is a senior resident, they can get on SAFER, pay less than $800, we get our minimum rent. It's a win-win. Maximum rent is up to 40% of income, but we do income testing. Most pay 30%, but we can move up to 40% with some exceptions. People are paying at a minimum $18,000 a year. The maximum amount allowed under HILS, which is what we follow, that's housing income limits set by BC Housing, is $58,000 a year, but most of our residents pay or earn far less than that. And there are no real subsidy supports except anything they can get independently, like SAFER. Then we have provincially subsidized. So this is in BC Housing buildings where it's very similar to what we offer. It's 30% of income, but they can go lower than the $800 a month. We just can't break even as an organization charging less than $800 a month. So minimum income is $6,600 a year. Maximum income is at HILS rate. So this is a subsidy that they would get from BC Housing. And finally, this affordable market, which is this low end of market that I've talked about, so this goes right up to $1,700 a month for a one bedroom or studio. These go up with RTA increases every year. It's not. We do an income test when they move in to make sure they're not earning way too much or way too little. But after that, they just pay market rate with allowable increases. So these are people who earn a household that earns 30, or an individual earns 39 to 84. As a household, it's a little higher than that, and there's no subsidy support. So that gives you a sense of the kind of range. So we can provide housing to a lot of different kinds of people. We just don't have every type of house. I mean, we've got a huge waiting list, but if you once you get past the waiting list, whatever you qualify for, we'll get you into the housing that's going to work best for your income level, your needs, etc. And then this is as of today, and we have more buildings opening up, so these numbers will go up. It gives you a sense, 37% studio, 47% one bedroom, 12% two bedrooms, and we have some 3 and a couple of 4 bedroom units. So so that's our current, the way our portfolio looks today. And that's it from me. So I think we're going to get into discussion afterwards, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Gloria, for inviting me today. I just wanted to give you an introduction to another sort of pillar of the community. Brightside being 70 years, we're doing 80 years here in the Lower Mainland, and I just wanted to give you an introduction of how things have been done by the Danish community here in the Lower Mainland for that period of time. And so just go over a bit about who we are and what the Campus of Care is, this multiplex system that they developed many years ago here in the Lower Mainland, and it sort of grew, I guess, in other communities here, and some of the successes and challenges we had and where we're going in the future. So a bit about us as a board here. It's predominantly Danish, and these are very, very successful Danes. A lot of them are, I guess, to some extent, been in the military. Paul Christensen in the Air Force for many years, actually thrown into the Arctic for, I think, 4 years and eating spaghetti and meatballs for 6 months at a time, I think, from what I've been told. But a great guy, very procedural, very business-minded, and the same with Dan Olsen as well in the forest industry for many years. I think he was one of the orchestrators of Macmillan Bodell here in BC. So, and Christensen in BC Hydro for many years, one of the major auditors. So there's a lot of skill set in what has been a very much an institution in Burnaby, right across from the city of Burnaby. We're as old as the city of Burnaby almost. Well, city of Burnaby is about 10 years older than us. Again, they work with me, and what I bring is basically, obviously, you could tell from the last name, I'm not Danish. So I'm of Italian background, of obviously Italian-Canadian, and I think to some extent the reason they like me is because I am very Italian to some extent, more Canadian that at the end of the day. But I think it's this idea of a village, I guess, living as a family, living together in one roof. I mean, I think the way the European way is you were born on the kitchen table and you're dying in the bedroom across the way, right? So aging in place was an important aspect of this. And I think the Danes have kept it for a long time that way. And with that, I do have ties to SFU and UBC, worked in the medicine field for many years doing clinical research. But my dad had dementia, and finally, this whole new world opened up to me. Actually, I drifted away from the pharmaceutical industry to come back and look after him with my mom, and my eyes just opened up. I did not realize, the poor staff, what they're up against some days. There's a lack of staffing. This was in the early 2000s. And I thought, I could take my operational background and put it into this type of vocation to some extent, which has become now, actually trying to see what we could do for our seniors. So I think the board picked it up. I picked up my enthusiasm and see where we can go with this and throw some research in there, because that's where I met Gloria. She reminded me, because I met her in the 90s at UBC when I was looking at anesthesia. She was looking at dementia and the effects of anesthesia on it. So I thought, there's a name, and here we are today, so many years later. But just to give you a sense, it's a fairly large campus, about 8 acres, again, across away from the city of Burnaby. It used to be a lot of farmland. A lot of Danes owned a lot of pastures there, and they sort of said, let's get together and build something for our seniors. And at that time, over the 80 years, what was residential care has become assisted living and now affordable housing. And it was it was 1938. That they were, some of the Danes that came over from Denmark thought, hey, there's no retirement homes out here in the West. What do we do? And one particular Dane made his way over to Burnaby from Alberta, Carl Mortensen Manor, and talked to the local church. He's like, I got a bunch of money. I need a home. I'll build it. And so they got together and they did that. In 1941, the church had a meeting, and by 1944, this Daniel home was finally built. So I'll show you a little bit of what it looked like. In the 1940s, on the side there is what the old first home looked like. And obviously, there was more need. They threw 2 ends to it. And then by the time they realized, hey, we need more staff, when the staff were too far away, they built them cottages, believe it or not. Carrieds were getting their own cottages, and they can bring their families over. That was the era of the 60s. And then by the 70s, this whole idea of assisted living was coming through. And believe it or not, Dania Manor was the first assisted living site in Mullet, BC. That was funded by Fraser Health. And with that, in parallel, there was Dania Home, which actually, I believe Gloria was helping pick the colors in the 50s, I believe, or 60s, of the bathrooms. I believe at that time. It was quite fascinating to find out that fact. But the Danes were already developing the idea of actually, hey, we need some placement of these seniors that are low income. And with that, they developed in the 90s this Carl Mortensen Manor 50-suite unit. And with that, they also thought, well, this particular Dania Home is aging out, and we should build a new one. And so in the 2000s, they built Dania Home in 2015 for about 96 seniors needing long-term care. So again, very interesting development over times. It was originally 100% Danish, and then gradually, as the funding came through the province, it became less and less, about 5 to 10% Danish now. It is multicultural. We take everybody. And to some extent, it is also dictated by the funding authorities, so Fraser Health to a large extent through access. So it gives you some sense. But just again, the backbone to all this has been obviously the Danes, but more particularly it was the Lutheran Church, a big supporter, originally in Vancouver, then moved over to Burnaby, and also the Ladies Auxiliary. Again, these women have been here for almost 80 years supporting this system, and with the help of Queen Margrethe of Denmark, she came out a couple times to salute them in what they do as good work. So they've been the backbone for this society for many years. Again, just a little bit more detail about what is there. I mean, residential care to some extent is 96 long-term care beds that's funded by Fraser Health. We have some respite beds, about 6 of them. And then we have about 40 assisted living suites, 10 of which are, 10 more is private pay, which I'll get into a little bit later. And then Carl Mortensen Manor, which is a BC-funded site, is about 49 subsidized suites for 55 and over. Again, a little bit about Dania Home, the complex care side, the long-term care side. Again, Fraser Health funds it. It's a licensed facility, so there's a licensing officer that comes in once a year to have a look and see what I'm up to and how the staff are doing. Again, it's supported by legislation here in British Columbia. We have to meet these regs to keep this building going. You're looking at basically a per diem. Every resident gets funded at about $248.01 last year per day. That's what it costs to run these things. And the staffing revolves around that figure, the staffing mix being important, that there is a staffing plan agreed upon before we start. And we have to deliver minimum 3.36 hours per day per resident. And the good thing on the Danes side is that they've been doing more than that. They've been bringing it up to 3.5, sometimes 3.8 hours per day. So they had a bit of an insight, even before all this came around, that they were overstaffing using the nonprofit monies that they had to make sure that the care was delivered properly. And good on them that they did that. And with that, obviously, just to give you some more background, obviously how the things work is that there is a funding letter sent out every year. It was usually around spring, and with COVID, it drifted into December. But that letter dictates that per diem that we have. A lot of the people that do come through the care home do have to have, obviously, income. 80% after-tax income goes into funding in there. So some of the people are paying $900 up to $3,200 per month there. In long-term care, and obviously Fraser Health tracks these expenses and makes sure that the money is well spent. If it's if you're spending it unwisely, then they claw back. It's part of the model that they've got. But a lot of the expenses goes to wages, obviously the buildings themselves and the administration of that. Assisted living is Dania Manor. Again, this is one that I think, for what I understand, is the first assisted living building in British Columbia. And it's fairly was set up just to help seniors that really needed just that little extra care, obviously looking at their daily activities with med management, bathing, grooming, laundry, meals. It's always 24/7 staffed all week. And there's obviously fail-safe systems with fall protection. That are monitoring, obviously, falls. And the levels of care have drifted, actually, over the years from 45 minutes a day per resident. It's drifting to 2.5. It's giving, I guess, 5, because what's happening is the system is so overloaded now with people with high acuities. They're actually, those that are supposed to be in long-term care are making their way into assisted living now. So it's quite interesting how the dynamics are changing and the need for more care, even now in an assisted living. Again, we did have an opportunity at that time to have some private suites, which I'll show you a bit later, that are reasonable suites. I mean, again, idea of aging in place and being affordable. And in this case, in this type of environment, you're paying about 70% after-tax income there. And we usually have about 100% occupancy. And again, in Dania Manor, you're getting 2 square meals, some muffins and stuff during the day to keep things going, and then some rec programming just to keep you stimulated. You can get out to the casino and also do a lot of activities, one-on-one activities with staff and volunteers. These are some of the rates that Fraser Health has, so you could end up paying about $1,000 all the way up to even $5,000 to be in this type of community. So again, I will show you the private pay side of it is a lot cheaper. We are obviously focused on community and making sure seniors have a place. And this is purely, though, hospitality. We just look after your laundry, make sure you're taking your pills. Just very basic services at these costs, but they're very affordable. If you could see, I mean, a 2-bedroom basement suite right now in Burnaby is going for $4,200. So it's amazing, and again, good on the Danes that they've been doing this for many years, supporting our seniors. The other aspect, the third flow of the operations is independent living. We do have Carl Mortensen Manor, and it's a BC Housing funded operation. We're doing about 30% pre-tax income, so the rents are anywhere between, right now, even now, $350 up to $650 per month. So I know the average is about $500 actually, from what I'm hearing, but the Danes have kept it lower. So it'd be interesting how that develops. And again, there's limits as to what you can to be in there. Obviously in Vancouver, it's $58,000 for a 1-bedroom, which a lot of Carl Mortensen suites are. Again, our success is really, even just in general, from the care to the shelter. Care-wise, we had no deaths during COVID, again, because we had extra staffing. We were more proactive. Also, we have great contracts with Fraser Health and BC Housing and other contractors out there to support us. We do follow best practices. The Danes throw a lot of money at keeping things at high standards. And the other thing, by doing all this, we got long-standing staff. We've got people there for 20 years. And part of my task is to monitor them, because what happens is, as you know, if the staff are happy, the residents are going to be happy. And so with that, it will trickle down. This is how we kind of measure life in these places. The challenges are the same with all the, nonprofits and for-profits. We obviously have, aging infrastructure. We got possible floods and fires that are coming. And also the need to fundraise. A lot of this is not obviously solely supported by the public monies. It is also private people that have given up their estate to us to support us through that. So, but all in all, even so, with all that, we're still seeing, as we are now, the need for more more shelter and more housing for seniors. And so our building committee got together, and they got together a number of groups again with their strong ties, and now are developing another project. This is our future coming through, another 155 units supported by BC Housing. It's a $60 million project. Again, the idea is that if you are ideally on campus, if you're living here, you could go into assisted living and eventually to long-term care. So it's a cycle all in one city block. Again, living and aging in place. So they've done, I think, a superb job. And this is kind of where we're at, and we're moving toward it. It's one of the high-end side of the buildings that BC Housing is building, because again, the Danes are also very green, so there's a lot of solar panels and a lot of technology in this that will keep this building going for another 80 years, we think. So that, in a nutshell, is us. Again, now visit us anytime, and thank you.
We have a few minutes for questions. I know that Louis knows I'm going to ask him this one, because which was, what percentage of people currently are of Danish background? Because, we're asking the question of inclusion, innovation, integration. At the same time, this province has been blessed by various ethnic groups who were the first to open seniors housing or care facilities. So Dania, the Icelandic, the German Canadian were very early in providing housing for seniors. So Louis, do you have to, is it any benefit to be Danish as opposed to some other ethnicity?
Well, I would say about maybe 75 years ago, maybe, but nowadays, obviously, it's a multicultural country, we're open to everybody. And I think a lot of Danes, although be it, I think may not need this type of shit, because a lot of them are well off, believe it or not. They are actually investing in communities. So I think the odds are very high that it's open, our particular is open to all ethnic groups. I do see the benefit, though, in what I'm hearing about the Southeast Asian community building their own care homes and their own, to preserve their culture and to eat their own foods. You know, I don't think the Danes can get the food right for the Southeast Asians, but if you can get an actual home devoted to that, just like the Italian community have got their own little setup there on Grandview Highway, I think it's important, because at the end of the day, you're trying to preserve memory at the end of the day. I think that's what you want. If you got dementia, these are things that do trigger good things, and you want to preserve that. So, but all in all, yeah, it was many years ago 100%, and now we're down to 5 to 10%. So.
Okay, and my question for you, William, is how do you deal with maintaining person-environment fit, in the sense that your projects are built for people who are independent? We know that some percentage of seniors are going to change status and no longer be able to be fully independent. How do you deal with that? And how many, roughly, would you say in terms of turnover per year? So we hear about renovictions. What we're not hearing much about is that we used to a while back, of people being evicted because their condition changed.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the most difficult things we face, and Allison and I actually formed a group of 6 CEOs in the sector to advocate between the ministers of health and housing on this gap, because what happens is that we're not staffed or funded, or we don't have the right to provide services to advocate on the behalf of an individual. We're their landlord. And so if we can go above and beyond, we will, but it's often very tricky, because the health authority doesn't want to hear from their landlord, nor should they. So if I would say that at any given time, we have probably 5 residents who are experiencing inability to live independently. So out of the, right now we have about 750 residents until these new redevelopments open. So I would say at any given time, 5 are in some kind of crisis. If we can help them access services, often they may be in denial about the services they need. They moved into Brightside when they were 68. They've lived with us for 15, 20 years. They're in denial about their own abilities. They're not looking to get that help. They don't want our help, and if we could unlock help, they refuse it. So that's the worst case scenario, and those are very, very difficult, because if they can't live independently and they're causing pest infestation, garbage buildup, it can be problematic for their neighbors. So the system. This is where the system has huge gaps and is broken. In a lot of cases, we can help navigate, or help point out where the services in community are. They will avail themselves of those services and continue living independently as long as they can. But if you're a very low income senior, your ability to get to some kind of further care that is more supported it's like winning the lottery. Getting into our housing is like winning the lottery. So this is where the system really falls apart. So we do everything we can to help people stay in place, age in place, be in the appropriate housing, but there comes a point where nothing we offer is appropriate and there's no place for them to go, and it's tragic.
Yeah, because over time the building ages and needs to be redeveloped or fixed, and the residents will change in their functional abilities. And when new people come in, they tend to come in at the level that the original tenants now are at. So it's not that you're refilling by young people or younger adults. And I guess the question for you is, can you help?
So absolutely, we have been able to do that with both nonprofit partners And while private sector landlords often get a bad rap, we've worked successfully with landlords in the private sector where we have been that third party for a senior who doesn't have anybody else and provided that, I guess, that triangulation for health authorities, the building manager, who is a trusted person for the senior, ourselves as the advocate to health, and the health person, and successfully saved some tenancies where a landlord comes to us and says, this person's been there for 20 years, they've had a loss in their family, a death of their spouse, and they're in depression, which is why this has translated to this. Can you help? So we built partnerships based on that kind of work. So yes, absolutely.
And you're based in New West. Can people from Vancouver Coastal access your services?
Yes, we are based in New West, but because of the kind of work we do and the need, we've developed partners that do exactly what we do around this system navigation. And one is right there, Mika, from West End Seniors Network in Vancouver. And her team, she has a navigator that would do the same kind of services or reach back to us and provide this. So we have partners now in all 5 regions of the province who could support a senior anywhere.
Okay. Are there any other burning questions from the floor?
There's
Join
one at the
me.
back, I think.
Oh,
There's a
okay.
gentleman.
Can't hear you.
Otherwise, it won't get picked up in the recording. I'm coming quickly. I'm jogging. I'm running around chairs.
Thanks so much. So when working with older people in precarious housing situations, as they're transitioning into affordable housing, I've been told that they're often lumped in with groups of people who are experiencing severe mental illness, severe substance use issues, and it actually becomes quite a frightening environment for them to live in. And also some of the housing experiences that they've had was, being in buildings where some units have been retrofitted, but some haven't. So experiences of rats, cockroaches, that type of situation. And I'm just wondering, is there any sort of precautions taken when finding affordable housing and placing seniors into housing that's more supportive? And I know these are difficult questions because housing's limited in general, so just your thoughts. Thank you.
No, good question. And yes, absolutely. Those are some of the considerations we take into when we're working with a senior or the partner, because we have seniors who may be currently battling addictions or mental health issues and who do not want supports. And so finding appropriate housing for them, just as much as you'd find a senior who has needs for a very sanitary, environment or needs a little bit of support. So all of that, it's kind of like peeling an onion. It takes a long time. It may be 6 or 8 meetings with the senior to identify their needs, manage expectations, because sometimes the senior remembers the old days well. I mean, we've had requests for a senior saying, well, I want to do painting and I want a picture window with natural light. Well, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to do that, but here's what we can do. And sometimes it's managing that expectation too, right? It is difficult. They're losing so many things. So how do you manage that expectation and help them understand that what they're, help make that work? So we absolutely do that. And it's not uncommon to find that not only in affordable housing, but even in the private sector. I mean, you'd see a SWAT team go and they're manufacturing drugs or chemicals in a strata building. So is it happening? Yes, it is. It's unfortunate, but yeah.
Well, please join me in thanking this panel.